This is Jim Fetzer, your host on The Real Deal.
In Dallas, Texas, 3 shots were fired at President Kennedy's motorcade.
It looks like one of those scenes of an old building being purposely dynamited and blown.
When we are successful, I'm just a patsy, and we will be
ready to make to come to the microphone, so we'll listen up.
A new world order.
My name's Robbie Parker.
It might have appeared that way, but from my close-up inspection, there's no evidence of a plane having crashed anywhere near the Pentagon.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th.
President Kennedy died at 1 p.m.
Live from the Media Broadcasting Center.
All right, welcome to the new JFK show number 92. So, been a more than unusual day. I'm not sure how much we're going to cover here today. However, we are going to ring the bell for round 3 as far as the Jim DiEugneio response. Now, I'm not sure. I know there was a lot that went on at the OIC, and I'm not really sure how much we're going to go into that, but I'll let Jim Fetzer go ahead and take it away from here. Chance, we appreciate you being in the engineer's chair, buddy. So go ahead, Dr. Fetzer.
Well, thank you, Gary. This is like our 3rd installment. If we catch the very first slide, Chance, this is like the 3rd installment of our response to Jim DiEugneio, and there's some very important aspects of what we're discussing today, because of which I'm going back to the beginning of our discussion of the man in the doorway. And I'm especially, that's slide number 2, Chance. I think we're probably following as we go, since I'm controlling them here. And it has astonished me. I mean, here's the objection. Alchin's photo. This is now Jim DiEugneio. I'm not going to detail here what Fetzer and Ralph Sinkay were propagating. It seems to me to be so wild, so far out, that was almost a caricature of those so-called tinfoiled hat JFK researchers were all about. So I refer the reader instead to the Oswald Innocence Campaign homepage, in which they spell out what they mean. For those who don't care to wade through all those pages in a nutshell, what they were saying was that in the famous Alchin's photo, the facial features of the figure of the Texas School depository doorway were done over in an attempt to hide that is Oswald's identity. The object was to make it appear that it was Billy Lovelady. In other words, the photo was altered. Let me just respond immediately to that first paragraph, that the photo was altered is not in doubt. And Ralph Sinkay's contribution was to point out to me from the beginning that it wasn't the face that was key. It was the height, the weight, the build, the clothing, the shirt, the T-shirt that mattered. Because as I shall explain, when you compare those features, it's already obvious that this has to be Lee Oswald. After all, there are only 2 alternatives. No one other than Billy Lovelady has ever been proposed as the alternative to Lee, although there is a third party who's been claimed to have been Billy Lovelady, who, as we shall see, obviously was not. So DiEugneio is just giving a straw man argument here, exaggerating the position. And notice he's not refuting anything about it. Here he says, continue. As others pointed out, there were films from that day which showed Lovelady outside the book depository with a plaid shirt on, and another film from inside the Dallas Police Department. The latter film showed both Lovelady and Oswald in the same room at the same time. One could see that Lovelady had a shirt on that was similar to the figure in the doorway. Further, a central tenet of Fetzer and Sinkay was that the doorway man figure was wearing a V-neck undershirt. Yet, when one looks at Robin Unger's finer resolution of the photo, to put it kindly, this is not readily evident. Well, this is just a crock. I mean, look, there was a guy in a plaid shirt, both outside the building and inside, but he wasn't doorman. He had a red and black checkered shirt that was buttoned right up to the neck. Doorman was wearing a very richly textured shirt that was splayed open down to his navel. So DiEugneio is a non-starter here. I mean, his position is simply indefensible. He continues, And later turned out through better photo renditions and comparisons that the Fetzer Cinqué V-neck appeared to be an illusion from a chin shadow. This created a serious problem since part of their argument was that Lovelady was wearing a round neck t-shirt and Oswald was not. Frankly, I've never heard the argument that Lovelady was wearing a round neck t-shirt and Oswald was not, but that the Oswald t-shirt does have pulls in the center and therefore the appearance of a V-neck is indisputable. For his version of Alchin's, Fetzer had used a scan from Life magazine, which of course did not make for a very good rendition of the photo. Finally, Pat Spear pointed out that Oswald had changed his shirt after he left the depository to go back to his rooming house. He did this since he did not think there was going to be any more work to do. Thus, the shirt that Fetzer claimed Oswald was wearing at the police station was not the same one he was wearing before the assassination. This, in turn, meant there was no control factor for the comparison because we really do not know what shirt Oswald was wearing in the depository. In the Alchin's photo was a black and white, so it was not easy to be definite about its color and pattern. Well, I don't know where Pat Spear came up with this, but the shirt that Oswald was wearing when he was arrested in very close proximity to the facsimile to the shirt on Doorman. In fact, we have established that they are the same shirt for a series of arguments to be established. And the improbability that Oswald would have gone home and changed his shirt and come back with one that matched the shirt on Doorman has got to be infinitesimal. This is just another ridiculous, exaggerated argument that bears no weight, carries no weight. It's an effort to clutch after straws. Larry, would you agree thus far?
Yeah, Jim, I wanted to mention, in fact, up the Fritz notes, because that's exactly where Pat Spear came up with the information about Lee Oswald changing his shirt. If you examine Fritz's notes, page 1, which were done on the 22nd of November, they mention that he changed his breeches, his pants, but they don't mention anything about the shirt. And the same thing happens when they're talking about the cab and bus ride. They never talk about the cab ride until the next day, which on the second page of Fritz's notes, if you examine them very carefully the way that I have done, that's when the first mention of the shirt comes about as being on the 23rd, which was the Saturday. So on the very first day of Oswald's interrogations by Captain Fritz, this business about him changing his shirt never surfaced. So I just wanted to mention. Yeah,
it's a late add-on. They're grasping after straws.
Exactly.
I was dumbfounded in an exchange I had today and yesterday, including Chris Mulligan, who's the publisher of Trine Day Books, that he thought Oswald had said he was inside in the lunchroom when, in fact, as we know from the Fritz notes, he said he was out with Bill Shelley in front. So it's staggering to me that someone in a position such as that of Chris Mulligan would be so ignorant about the most basic facts about the issue of Doorman. I must further say, by the way, that Ed Haslam has rather stunned me by seemingly being a critic of the case when I regard him as such a meticulous and objective student. So I'm dedicating our presentation this evening to Ed Haslam in the hope that he will reconsider by actually reviewing the evidence we present here, which will be very painstaking and thorough. So we know right off the bat that Lee told Fritz he was out with Bill Shelley in front when the motorcade passed by. And indeed, then in the Alchin's photograph, and this is a high-quality version, you can see the area that we are addressing where this individual appears to be extending out to see what's going on. That certainly bears a resemblance to Lee Oswald. Notice already you can tell his shirt is splayed open down to the navel. There are other properties here we'll consider as well. But this led me to begin looking around for Oswald in the doorway, and I came up with this. I found this on the John McAdams website, and I had a circle around a man whose face had been obfuscated, which I initially believed had to have been Lee Oswald. Otherwise, why would you alter an historic photograph to take out someone's face unless it was someone who should not have been there? Notice you have Billy Lovelady in the middle here, and to the right, the fellow I referred to as Gorilla Man, because as we'll see when we compare his profile and his build, with that of Billy Lovelady. He's clearly not the same person. With Doorman, Billy himself observed he was 2 to 3 inches shorter than Lee and 15 to 20 pounds heavier, and could not understand why they were ever confused. But Gorilla Man has got to be 30 or 40 pounds heavier than Doorman and bears no resemblance at all. But he was found in the some of this footage where he may even have been photoshopped into those frames. Larry, your comment?
Definitely. And I definitely want to comment on this magnificent slide that you're presenting here, Jim, where you can clearly see the pocket flap, the breast pocket with the flap of Gorilla Man in the Martin film versus the Billy Lovelady standing in the doorway, which is a photograph taken by Bob Jackson from the Times Herald newspaper. Right there. I mean, you can tell. I mean, our audience can look at it. If you look at this slide, you can see right there that there is a breast pocket on the man, which we call Gorilla Man, clearly visible there. However, when you look at the Lovelady with this plaid shirt right there that you are indicating with the pointer, with the mouse pointer, there is no pocket flap there. So
there are also alterations to the sleeve in these photographs, which are in Robert Grodin's book, The Search for Lee Harvey Oswald. It's all terribly troubling because Grodin's history here is a very, very disturbing one, where he served as a special counsel, a special advisor to the HSCA to determine who was the man in the doorway. And he maintained that the shirt that Billy Lovelady had been wearing bore a closer resemblance to Doorman shirt than the one in which Lee Oswald was arrested, which we will discover is precisely the opposite of the facts.
That's right. And you don't see, I don't see any pocket flap on right now, right there on the isolation of Doorman. I don't see any pocket flap there on the left breast pocket right there at his left breast. I don't see any. I don't know if you can tell, from your angle there.
No. It's already clear that there's no pocket there, but we'll get back to it because we have another.
We'll get back to that. But
we have another slide, Larry, that shows it. Now, this is the frame that virtually every student of this question uses. It comes from Robert Grodin, JFK Absolute Proof. And I'd just like to point out, how anyone can claim it hasn't been altered when we have the man with the obfuscated face I'm circling here is beyond me. How anyone can fail to see that Doorman is missing his left shoulder is beyond me. How anyone can fail to see that the black tie man is both in front of and behind Doorman at the same time, which is a physiological impossibility, is beyond me. Anyone who cannot see that the man here, wearing a short sleeve shirt with his hands raised to protect his eyes, has had his face obfuscated, is beyond me. All of these are very obvious indications of alteration in this particular area of the Alton's film. And this figure, Black Hole Man, is especially significant because that turns out to be Billy Lovelady.
Also, his chest is obfuscated. If you look at how his chest has been whited out.
Here, yes. No doubt to obfuscate that he's wearing a red and white vertically striped short sleeve shirt, which was showed to the FBI on the 29th of February, 1964.
That's right.
Now, here is Lee when he was arrested, and in comparison with Doorman. And it is a very richly textured shirt. It's worn. Look down at the bottom. It's splayed open. And if DiEugneio has a problem with a V, look at this photograph. What could be more obvious than that there was a V there?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry to say that I have lost the sequence of the photographs. I think there's a way to get back.
Back up 2 slides.
Here we go.
One more.
Yeah. One more.
There you go. Yeah.
No, I got to go here. I mean, look there. You can see the V-neck, and this not some feature of shadows or whatever. I mean, what does DiEugneio think he's talking about? I believe he just took anything anyone said that he thought could be used against us and used it regardless of the facts. He made no effort to verify whether that claim was or was not true. It's obviously false because there is a V-neck, and it's not to do with shadows. It's not an element of imagination. Very embarrassing that we have nothing better from Jim DiEugneio than that. He's also made the claim, by the way, that Billy Lovelady was not asked to wear the shirt that he had been wearing on 22 November 63. That's precisely the opposite Let me read a few sentences from the FBI report to J. Edgar Hoover. Billy Nolan Lovelady appeared at the Dallas FBI office, at which time he consented to be photographed. Lovelady advised us that on the day of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, November 22nd, 1963, at the time of the assassination and shortly before, he was standing in the doorway of the front entrance to the Texas School Book Depository building, 411 Elm Street, Dallas, Texas, where he is employed. He stated he was wearing a red and white, a vertically striped shirt and blue jeans, which they duly photographed, as the next photograph shows. I mean, what's ambiguous about that? It's described in the FBI report. It was the shirt he was wearing at the time by his own declaration. I mean, DiEugneio is just committing the most shoddy kind of deception here, and it's clear that he has agenda and no interest in truth.
It's all just completely obvious. And,
is it not?
What's going across my mind more than anything, I guess I have to say I'm more heartbroken to where that we're actually explaining all this stuff to Ed Haslam. He's really a hometown boy, and I really hope that he does watch the show. And this is so obvious stuff. This is not.
I've told him it was dedicated to him tonight and invited him to show. Notice here, Billy is wearing a T-shirt that is a round neck, unlike Lee's V-neck. But there's no question that Lee's shirt had a V-neck. My understanding is because he tugged at his shirt and created it that way. Here's the next. This is where you get the clear difference between Dr. Jekyll, Billy Lovelady, and Mr. Hyde, the imposter. This is why I referred to him as Gorilla Man. Look at the profile of this man. He looks like a gorilla. And while they've unbuttoned him here because they realize that's a problem, here he's buttoned right up to the neck. And notice, again, we have the pocket on the shirt, which turns out to be missing in the photograph, to which Larry has made several references at this point in time. This man does appear to have been in the doorway, but not up at the top where Lee and Billy were standing, but further down in the crowd. And I think they were desperate to find some alternative explanation and seized upon it. Would you agree, Larry?
Yeah, I wanted to also mention quickly here that we did craniometric comparisons since you're able to see the profile of Gorilla Man, and we overlaid them with the Billy Lovelady's profile there, as seen in the FBI photograph, and they were like night and day, Jim. You know, the ears were positioned differently, the neck, the angle of the neck was completely different. The chin, I mean, it was, you know, it wasn't even close, you know. So
DiEugneio's argument is so slovenly that only someone who is utterly unfamiliar with the evidence in this case, well, we probably published 30 articles about this, making one point after another in the most minute fashion, including into the Warren Commission hearings, the taking out of Buell Wesley Frazier and the like, Larry. To me, it's embarrassing that this man should be taken seriously as a student of JFK.
Yeah, he picked on the wrong people tonight. I mean, you two guys are the ones that you just can't mess with y'all about this.
Now, here you have a photograph for a comparison of the left sleeves that was done by Judith Mary Baker. And in fact, she proved to be quite brilliant. Judith is a sensational student of science. It was because she was so successful, even already in high school, at developing a rapid-acting cancer in laboratory rats, that she was invited by Elton Oshner to come to New Orleans and participate in a project where he promised her admission to medical school without even having to complete an undergraduate education. But she compared the sleeves of them in the following study. Here you have the Alchins compared with Oswald at the top and the Alchins compared with Lovelady at the bottom. Now, mind you, this is precisely the opposite to the result claimed by Robert Groden, which means that he either did not know what he was doing or was deliberately obfuscating the evidence, because here it's very clear at the bottom, the Lovelady shirt bears no comparison to the shirt in the Alchin shirt at 6, whereas Oswald is a very close comparison, and thereby has Judith eliminated that shirt from having been on the man in the doorway? Larry.
Yeah, and this was a study by Judith Berry Baker, and I just wanted to mention that when Ed Haslam did his presentation at her conference last November, he stressed the scientific background that Judith Berry Baker had, and exactly what you were mentioning, Jim. And that she had been a prodigy, a teenage prodigy in her endeavors, in her experiments, as you mentioned, giving mice cancer in such a fast time. And also another point that not many people know about, that she had been able to extract, I believe, magnesium out of seawater, in a much more efficient manner than anybody at the time. And that was another thing that really attracted all of these universities and all these faculty and academics, to Judith Berry Baker, and I thought that was very impressive.
I just want to reiterate that when Robert Groden served as a special advisor to the HSCA, he came back with the result that the Lovelady shirt was a closer match to the shirt on Doorman than was the Oswald shirt. As you can see here, that was a false report by Robert Groden on a crucial issue before the HSCA. And in my judgment, that is unforgivable.
And again, he also publishes in his book, Killing of a President, on page 187, where he has two images there of Gorilla Man, the Man in the Martin film, and the photograph that he took in 1976 of Lovelady in Denver. And again, I have to mention it again ad nauseum, this thing about the pocket flap. If the one shirt does not have the pocket flap, then we're not talking about the same shirt, and that's exactly what we're talking about. Thank you.
Here it is. No flap.
And these images are taken from his book, 1987. Page 187 for the book "Killing of a President."
So is Robert Groden so incompetent he can't tell the difference between a shirt with a pocket and a shirt without a pocket? What are we talking about here? How profound is the depravity? How profound is the corruption involved here? When he can't even get a simple comparison like this accurate, something is terribly wrong.
Yeah, and all our readers have to do is look in his book, page 187. Again, I have to mention it again and over and over and over again. This is basic to the contention of Billy Lovelady and his checkered colored shirt, the plaid shirt. It just doesn't exist.
And I'm so impressed, Larry, with the work you've done in photogrammetry of applying, a matrix, a mapping to the faces of the subject to bring out their comparison. And while most of us believed in the beginning that Ralph had carried the case about as far as it could be carried in terms of the height, the weight, the clothing, the shirt, the build, and so forth, you have demonstrated that our prior belief that the face had been altered appears to be mistaken, with the possible exception of the hairline, about which I will invite you to comment further. And here, indeed, is one of your comparisons. Please talk about it.
Yeah, this is what in forensic science is called a photogrammetric comparison, where you lay both of the photographs of the individuals side by side, and you can either use a grid with the ruler or with the next slide, what you're going to present, you can draw lines across so you can extend and look at how the features line up side by side. This is added. This is a complementary to the overlay system that you saw in the previous slide, where we just overlay the features from the individuals in question. That, like I said, is a complementary exercise to this photogrammetric system here, and both of them are completely valid, and they're used in forensic sciences all throughout the world. And once we line up with what is known as the interpupillary distance, then that is when we're able to determine, and we did a very lengthy show back in November about this, but I'm happy to repeat it again here. Once we establish the interpupillary distance of the individuals, then we can start to look at the differences in the other features, such as the nose, the mouth, the chin, the ear, and how everything falls into place. Okay, and then and you know, it's just here. Yeah, thank you. And this is where we draw the line across. For example, at the top, you know, the eyebrows, and you can see the one on the right. The eyebrows extend higher from the red line. Then we go right under the nose, and you can see that the nose on the man on the right it does not touch that line, and the chin as well. The chin on the man on the right extends further, a little further down from the red line. And like I said, photogrammetrics are very important in identifying photographs of individuals like this.
Well, it's absolutely.
Are there people that are in prison or have gotten out of prison from this technique, Larry?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and you know, and this is also a field. There's a field that we mentioned before called biometrics, where even in airports and in security systems, where faces are scanned, okay, and in a way where they can be compared to databases, all right, of individuals in those databases to find out, you know, if we have criminals running around.
And here is a new photograph allegedly found by Robin Unger, as I understand it. And, you know, Larry, just as I look at this photograph of Lovelady, it looks to me the pixelization around the mouth is altered, that it's therefore almost certainly been touched up. But it gave you another basis for another comparison using another photograph.
Yeah, I was happy to see this one. I mean, because when we did our initial study in October and November, we had to use flipped images, and we received a lot of criticism because of that. But when Unger, I had actually had this article, but the photograph wasn't as clear as what Robin had supplied recently. And when I saw this, I said, well, wait a minute, this one isn't flipped the way we had to do the previous slide that you saw in the photogrammetric comparison. And what I did was I just used this one as a stock image of Lovelady, because I mean, it's pretty obvious that they're trying to make him look as much as doorman as possible, you know, right? Pursing the lips, pursing the lips, you know, squinting the eyes, you know. But when they did that, right. When they did that, they sort of like threw all of the features out of alignment, actually. So if you look closely at the right, you know, when I set the interpupillary distance of that Lovelady, it shrank. It actually shrank his face, okay, in a horizontal plane, okay. Yes. And what it did, and you can see it, you can't tell very much, but what it did is it brought the ear in a way where the ear doesn't even match up to
it narrowed the face.
Exactly.
You're using doorman's image as the background here for this photogrammetric comparison.
That's right. So, you know, for those who criticize us that we use the flipped image, you know, my answer to that is, well, hey, wait a minute, the flipped image looked better and aligned better than what this image does, because, you know, this is not a flipped image. And you know, again, when I set the interpupillary distance and I put the grid and the ruler and everything, you know, it made me shrink that face even further to set that interpupillary distance, and it totally discombobulated the entire face in a way that it doesn't even look right. You know, it looks like he looks like a cone head, you know, from
yes.
Live.
and here you have a GIF attempting to show Lovelady as doorman, and it's
right.
rather obvious it doesn't work.
Right, and you can see that the ear doesn't even reach the ear. The ear is tucked in there in the dark area there on the left side of the image, and it doesn't even extend all the way to the ear of doorman, because once I set the interpupillary distance, as you can see, the eyes are set exactly to the distance of doorman. And I also wanted to mention something very important, Jim. Even if we did not use Lee Oswald as a subject in this study, okay, just by using this image alone, it excludes Billy Lovelady as doorman, because as you can see, he obviously does not fit, you know, in the image of doorman because of what I just mentioned.
I've argued from the beginning it was a simple argument by elimination. It's either Lovelady or it's Oswald, but it isn't Lovelady. And it not only does that lead to the conclusion it's Oswald by this argument, but when you compare the height, the weight, the build, the shirt, the T-shirt, it's obvious that it's Lee because there's all that additional evidence. And your GIF, Larry, which we aren't seeing yet, of Oswald's face filling out doorman is just absolutely devastating. And I don't know if Chance had a problem with his computer, whether we're going to be able to see that now or not. Chance, are we able to see those GIFs?
MP4s. Yeah, well, yeah, and those are, you know, those are the final nail in the coffin, Jim. But like I said, even if we did not use those images and those animations, you know, just by using this that you have here on the screen, I mean, it excludes completely.
No one has ever suggested any other candidate.
Yeah, I know, and they can't say that this is a flipped image. This is exactly the image that was provided, like I said, from this man, Robin Unger, you know, from that article when Billy Lovelady died, and again, they tried to make him look like doorman, but they ended up making him look like a caricature.
And here's a wonderful comparison of their ears, Larry. Comment on this.
Yeah. I was researching that angle of the ears, and I discovered that both of them, when you look at the profiles, the position of the ears was completely different from one another, and that also is very important when you consider any comparison of doorman, and that is the basic reason why Billy Lovelady's ear does not line up with doorman, because he's not doorman.
Because he isn't. Yes, of course. Needless to say.
Yeah.
I don't understand how anyone can continue to insist that it was doorman when Billy was wearing a completely different shirt. I mean, already that was conclusive. Jones Harris, who was at the time dating Jackie Kennedy's social secretary, flew all the way from New York to interview Billy Lovelady, and Billy confirmed to Jones that he'd been wearing the short sleeve red and white vertically striped shirt, which is already closing the case on this question. Billy's too short, too heavy, but was dressed the wrong way to even make it remotely case similar. And you have established that he's dissimilar with regard to the facial features as well, and the ears.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I want to also mention, Jim, because since we published these findings back in October and November, nobody has come up with an alternate solution on this. Nobody has done the overlays following my methodology as spelled out in the paper, and I will debate anybody publicly or privately on this issue, Jim, and I will take this all the way, because this research is solid. Judy Baker was instrumental in moving this forward, and like I said, I will debate anybody.
I think your work's completely brilliant, Larry. It's objective, it's scientific, and anyone who would suggest there's any tinfoil aspect of this must be looking in a mirror, because what DiEugneio has said here reflects complete and utter ignorance, total incompetence. We have done our homework; he has not. And
let them bring their proof, and let's put all the cards on the table, and let the public decide. You know, once they see and they evaluate, the presentations, as it should be done.
Gary, did you want to get a word in edgewise?
I'm just sitting back here watching the champions just roll roughshod over the JFK community. Right.
Well, here's an early analysis of Richard Hook as to how it was done by moving certain parts, including of the features of who may have been Jack Ruby to the left here with the black tie to create Black Tie Man. And I think they needed to move parts to get the right focal features and texture of the photograph, and that's why they moved internal features around. We have the face that's scratched out, obfuscated man. We have the face here. It's partially sketched in actually Billy Lovelady there, Lee. All the features we've been talking about. And here, Ralph Sinkay. I mean, this single discovery by Ralph Sinkay transcends any contribution Jim DiEugneio has ever made in his entire career. Ralph Sinkay was so persevering, he discovered in response to the claims that the photograph, the Alchin-Sitch, had been published too early to have ever been altered, resonating with the claim of Tink Thompson that the film had been, had a chain of custody that didn't allow it to be edited, where he found that the News Palladium, for example, was one of a number of newspapers where the CIA went to the extent to create a whole separate phony issue. Larry, this is a staggering discovery. All by itself, it blows the whole lid off of the cover-up and the assassination of JFK.
Well, you know, and it also indicates, you know, how many transformations the Altgen 6 photograph went through during the weekend, because these very first images of the Altgen 6 were extremely cropped. We did not get to see the entire photograph, and I'm just saying the entire in quotations, because if you study the type of photograph that Altgen took, you'll see that the upper portion of the photograph has never been shown. I mean, beyond the trees and the upper parts of the Daltex building. But you know, these the first rendition of the Altgen 6 photograph that showed the Daltex building and the fire escape there were not published until the Saturday Evening Post on the 14th of December.
Of course, here you can still see the bullet hole in the windshield where JFK's left ear would be if his left ear were visible, which Robert Groden denies in the text of his book while showing a photograph where you can see the bullet hole. I mean, I'm telling you, that takes some nerve.
Which was discovered by Roy Schaefer, I might add.
Yeah, you got beating him over his head with his own book.
And DiEugneio goes after me and Ralph Sinkay as though we were unique here. There's a whole host. I mean, we must have 40 members of the Oswald Innocence Campaign already, including David Rohn, including Vince Salandri, including Abraham Bolden, including Jack White, Mark Lane, Gerald McKnight, and a host of others. And some of the most important figures historically.
Jim Garrison.
Oswald was in the doorway, included the Whitewash series author, Harold Weisberg, and no less than Jim Garrison himself, Larry.
That's right. And I wanted to mention that Jack White, if you examine the archives of the Deep Politics forum there, Jack White talked about, and he wrote about, that not only was the Altgen 6 photograph altered, but he thought that all 4 of the Altgen 6 photographs that showed events in Dealey Plaza had been altered, including 5, 4, and especially 7, where the famous photograph where you see Jackie pulling in Clint Hill into the limo. And in the background, you see Chief Curry has pulled the lead car to a complete stop, and you can see Sheriff Decker turned around, and the rear window has been completely obfuscated, and you have a little sliver emanating out of the flag, you know, covering up part of the rear window and stuff like that.
Let me just say that DiEugneio suggests that people go to the pages of the Oswald Innocence Campaign. Well, this is their home page. And what do you discover? Photograph after photograph, dozens and dozens of photographs of scholars, students of JFK, who agree to the proposition that Lee was in the doorway, which means this is a very peculiar case of special pleading, where he only cites me and Ralph Sinkay as though we were unique or idiosyncratic, when there's a very large number of very substantial students of JFK who agree with this proposition. And it's especially insulting when the man on whom he claims to be the world's greatest expert himself agreed that it was Oswald in the doorway, namely Jim Garrison.
Yeah, they have these people on their show sometimes. A lot of these people in the OIC go on Black Op Radio often.
And first generation Vincent Salandri. I mean, how, you know, you can't get any more direct than Vincent Salandri, you know, and he's a pillar among.
May I say, Vince Salandria has the honor of having been the first to call out Josiah Thompson as making the disinformation, because at the conclusion of his book, which including the double hit theory, the Robert McClellan diagram and others offered ample proof of conspiracy claims at the end of his book that none of this proves conspiracy, which led Vince to call him out. I was not the first. Vince has that honor, but I most certainly have offered substantiating evidence and pointed out that when he started to disavow his own double hit theory, which David Lifton had independently verified with Richard Feynman, who detected the motion from 312 to 313, completely independently. The world's most famous physicist confirms it. When he started to try to deny it, it was obvious to me that he was setting up to disavow conspiracy in the death of JFK for the 50th. And I published an article about it. Everyone should read. The CIA, the New York Times, and Jake Thompson. You can find it online.
I have a very short anecdote that Vince Salandria told me about, because he's very active in the OIC, believe it or not, and he exchanges emails with all of the members that email him. But he told me about an incident where Josiah Thompson had been arrested over some protests, I believe in 1964, and Vince Salandria, as being a lawyer for the ACLU, went to defend these individuals, and to his amazement, Josiah Thompson was released, before anybody, without any reason that he thought that he could see, and he immediately he thought that perhaps this man was some kind of an agent provocateur or something of the sort, where
working undercover for the government.
That's right, where he was given special consideration and special treatment, and Vince tells the story, because he was there and he witnessed the entire incident. So in repudiating the man in the doorway, is Jim DiEugneio thereby repudiating Jim Garrison, whom he writes about so extensively? And why has he not shown the candor to acknowledge that Garrison's position was that Lee was in the doorway? And we've shown Garrison in the videotape from his tape, the assassination tapes, which came out in 1992, okay, where he says, in fact, it was Lee in the doorway. We've played this on this program many times.
Let me ask if Chance can play those GIFs, because they're sensational. Chance, can you play the two GIFs that Gary prepared?
Oh, great.
You can play them. Oh, perfect. Well, it seems to me we're in a position of demonstrating that, yes, somebody is incompetent. And if you put Jim DiEugneio and Robert Groden and Josiah Thompson on one side, and me and Ralph Cinque, Larry Rivera, Don Fox, Gary King on the other, it's becoming increasingly obvious who is doing the job and who is not, who is exposing the truth and who is concealing it. Now, here's another complaint. Mary's Mosaic. Fetzer now raises saintly, self-righteous manner to even higher amplitude. On Amazon.com, he called Janney's book a litmus test for the research community, one that would separate the competent from the frivolous, the courageous from the cowardly, and the honest from the dishonest. But, as with his commentary on Judith Baker, what became obvious in his review of Janney was that he knew little or nothing about the Mary Meyer case before he read the book. He simply accepted just about all that the author wrote as if it were fact, despite Janney actually using people like Gregory Douglas as a source. Janney also appeared on Fetzer's podcast more than once. Again, Fetzer did not challenge any of the tenets of the book. For instance, Janney had written that his suspected killer, William Mitchell, had disappeared off the face of the earth. And lo and behold, researcher Tom Scully, armed with only a computer, had found him living in Northern California, and it was a correct Mitchell. This is symptomatic of DiEugneio's methodology. He thinks if you ever held one position, that must be your position ever after. Peter Janney discovered information that showed that Mitchell was still alive, actually confronted Mitchell. So that DiEugneio is simply distorting the history of the case. It's like the absurdity he claims about my work with regard to Gregory Douglas, which I'm going to address. Here he continues.
Yeah, he went and knocked on his door in California, Jim, and he filed a lawsuit.
I know, but you wouldn't hear that from Jim DiEugneio, would you?
Yeah, all of these people have already responded to this. See, what it appears to me, Jim, that and Larry, that this is the Santa Barbara conference. Every single person that's being criticized in this article was in Santa Barbara. And Judith Baker was supposed to be there as well. So I've actually had a radio show, excuse me, for 1 hour on each and every one of these people. You can see it online.
Well,
I asked them already. So what it looks like to me is that he took a lot of articles and he just put them into one and made it on the Sitka page and called it The Decline of Jim Fetzer.
Well, it's quite ridiculous. Let's read the further quote that Don extracted. If that were not embarrassing enough, Scully's information on Mitchell revealed that he was in his 70s at this time. Yet the late Leo D'Amour, Janey had adapted and used his work profusely in his book, said he'd met Mitchell in the early 90s and he was 74 at that time. How can a man not age in a generation? Further, Fetzer suggested that since Janey could not find any details of his academic career at Harvard, where he allegedly attended, that record must have been purged. But Scully found those records, once again, armed only with a computer. This episode revealed in excelsis the severe shortcomings in Fetzer's critical apparatus. As this author has stated, criticism is nothing if not qualitative analysis. That is, one must examine the data the author adduces, where he got it, and how solidly backed it is. That rule is common one in historical analysis, but it is even more important for the JFK case for the simple reason that this field is littered with fraudsters, politically motivated spear jobs, and deliberate disinformation, which seems to me to be a perfect description of Jim DiEugneio's attack upon me here. I mean, this is bizarre. Mary's Mosaic is a completely brilliant book, and I believe why the CIA has been so upset is because Peter Janney delineates the methods they use in taking out Mary Meyer, which involved controlling everyone who was in the vicinity, faking, the person who would be proposed to be the suspect, luring an innocent bystander to view the event. These are kinds of methods of procedure that the CIA does not want revealed. They protect more than anything their own methodology. And I reiterate that this is a brilliant book and absolutely a litmus test, one which Jim DiEugneio has clearly failed.
Well, you know, when you have to admit that your own father was involved in this type of operation, it takes a lot of guts, Jim, for somebody,
You're absolutely right. And as Gary was observing, Peter Janney spoke in Santa Barbara at the conference, JFK at 50, the assassination of America. Here was his abstract, tying up loose ends, the murder of Mary Meyer. Peter Janney grew up in Washington, D.C. during the Cold War era of the 1950s and the 1960s. His father, Wister, was a senior career CIA official. The Janney family was intimately involved with many of the Washington political elite that included the family of Mary and Cord Meyer, as well as other high-ranking CIA officials, such as Richard Helms, James Jesus Angleton, Tracy Barnes, Desmond Fitzgerald, and William Colby. In his gripping book, Mary's Mosaic, 2012, Peter illuminates the magnitude of real-life evil perpetrated by the CIA far beyond that which most of us could ever imagine. A graduate of Princeton, Peter is a clinical psychologist who lives by the sea in Beverly, Massachusetts. And Peter, of course, gave a presentation. Everyone can find it online. Go to JFK, The Assassination of America, Part 3 of 6 by Peter Janney. And just to offer a couple of observations, this book on Amazon has had 299 Amazon reviews. The average of those reviews is 4.5 stars. This book was the winner of the 2012 Hollywood Book Festival for General Nonfiction. Honorable mention at the 2012 New England Book Festival for General Nonfiction. Honorable mention 2012 London Book Festival for General Nonfiction. It's been highly praised by a very large number of students. And here, let me offer a review, not by me. Magnificent and courageous too. 5 stars. David W. Manting. If Peter Janney's CIA father, Wister, were still alive, he would likely not be reading this book. After all, it provides convincing evidence that Wister knew that Mary had died even before the police had identified her body, which means that he, Wister, had foreknowledge of the murder plot. Peter also makes a strong case that Ben Bradley of the Washington Post likewise had advanced knowledge, perhaps also tipped off by Wister. When one's own father is so deeply committed to a cover-up, it requires enormous courage to disclose the family jewels. But courage is what Peter has in spades. His relentless pursuit of long-hidden links and evasive witnesses leads to his final denouement, a truly remarkable Cold War murder mystery played out on the shores of the Potomac. If Peter is correct about Mary's execution and cover-up, then the CIA did not hesitate to throw away the life of an innocent black man, Ray Crump. That recklessness all by itself speaks volumes about the Cold War morals of the CIA. The two highly compartmentalized NBIC episodes with a Zapruder film on successive nights, November 23rd and 24th, 1963, are profoundly alarming. Short of some degree of film alteration between those two dates, why was this secret so tightly guarded? After all, Dino Bruglione, who was on call that weekend for the NBIC, only learned of the second event after Peter told him about it. Furthermore, Bruglione's recollections are at odds with the extant film, so at odds with the extant film that they raise overwhelming suspicion of film tampering that same weekend. With this book, Peter achieves a remarkable triumph, setting the historical stage with many quotations and facts for telling his personal story, which is so intertwined in this saga. Although it was a very different era, and that enemy spoke Russian, one can only wonder, with the current war on terror, how much of the stratagems and values change today. So is Jim DiEugneio also going to denounce David W. Manick, MD, PhD, the leading expert on the medical evidence in the world today?
Yeah, I was going to add to that, Jim. Let's not forget that it was also Peter Janney who brokered the interview, that magnificent interview that Douglas Warren did with Bruglione. Recently, it's on YouTube, and that was all done because of Peter Janney's intimate relationship with all these CIA people that he knew through his father.
Yeah, don't forget his father had a document saying if they don't do something soon, that Clay Shaw was going to be convicted, and they had to do something about Jim Garrison. So Jim DiEugneio is all about Jim Garrison, but he never really talks about that.
I think Jim DiEugneio is really all about Jim DiEugneio. And as we've been going through each of the complaints he's lodged against me, we find none of them have any substance. All of them are contrived. The evidence is overwhelmingly contrary to the position he adopts. He can find no fault in my research or the conclusions of those with whom I have been collaborating, as we have been demonstrating here again and again and again. So if Jim DiEugneio wants to propose that someone out here is a fraud and an agent of disinformation, I will agree to this extent. Either Jim DiEugneio or I is an agent of fraud and disinformation. The evidence is simply overwhelming, and I leave it to each of you to draw the appropriate conclusion. Larry, Gary, would you like to make any comments in conclusion?
Go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, well, I communicate with Phil Nelson quite a bit, and because I also happen to believe that there was LBJ ducking. Because even the cops, including B.J. Martin, the escort, had talked about that after the assassination. And I found actually yesterday and today I've been working on some collages which show this woman in the Altgen 6 photograph who has been blocked out of the image, with this ink blot, where she has her camera, apparently a Super 8, an 8mm camera trained, if you follow the line of sight, on LBJ. And so that is the reason that they erased her out of the Altgen 6 photograph. She's right there to the left of the Altgen 6 photograph, and there are two big ink blots covering those two women. There's two women there, and one ink blot is bigger than the other one, but the one on the right, you can clearly see the hand strap of the camera that she is recording the motorcade with, and she happens to be following the same line of sight that would have been, her camera would have been trained on LBJ, and had that film been had it surfaced anywhere, it would have showed that LBJ was nowhere to be found in his limousine, when the shots were ringing out in Dealey Plaza, and that supports Phil Nelson.
Yes, absolutely. Let me just say, I think that one of the great advantages I have over someone like Jim DiEugneio is I know the limitations of my own knowledge, and therefore I bring in experts, as in the case of assassination science. David Manning, Bob Livingston, Chuck Crenshaw, and a host of others. Eventually, we'd be joined by John Costella. But in the meanwhile, also the work of Doug Horn and Vince Palomara and Doug Weldon. Yeah, no, I mean, look at these books. I mean, and eventually David Lifton became a contributor as well. My good friend out in Nevada about the techniques that were available for doing this kind of alteration of the film.
Gary Aguilar also.
And let us just say, yeah, which is a fascinating case because, need I remind us, that was the one article that Tink Thompson praised in Murder in Dealey Plaza, which by praising it meant that he was actually supporting evidence that contradicts his claims to the authenticity of the Zapruder film. So I think there's a lot of lack of rigorous critical methodology floating around here, but none of it is on my side, I dare say. This is Jim Fetzer thanking my special guests this evening, Larry Rivera and Gary King. Gary, do you want to sign off?
I just want to say it was truly fascinating watching the two top JFK researchers in the world hitting on all 8 cylinders. We will be back for round 4 next week. This has been the JFK show number 92. We thank you once again, Chance, George, and the engineer's chair. And just great job. Just totally fascinating watching you guys operate.
Thank you, Gary.
Next week.